please stand for the reading of the gospel? The Holy Gospel of our Lord according to Matthew. Praise to you, Lord Christ. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." And Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "And this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." And Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended him. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Father, I pray that you would come in spirit and in truth as we open your word, that you would open our hearts and minds to receive all that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. They've done some recent sociological studies, and one of the things they've been studying is the difference between sympathy and empathy. Now, you probably know a little bit of that, right? So sympathy is, I feel bad for you because I know something has gone on in your life, something difficult, something hard, something challenging, and I feel bad. Now, I haven't experienced it, but I wish it didn't happen for you a little bit, a lot of it maybe. But empathy is completely different. Empathy is, I've been through exactly what you've been through. I know the pain. I know the difficulty. I know the challenges you face. And I'm right here with you, walking side by side with you, arm in arm. I feel the pain that you have. Now, the sociologists have found that empathy actually builds deep connections with people. When they look at empathetic moments where that happens, as they're training people to do therapy, they realize that empathy builds this deep connection and understanding where people relate to one another in a deeper fashion. But actually, sympathy goes the other way. Sympathy actually sometimes pushes people away. Sympathy actually creates a divide with people. Okay? So if I'm sympathetic with you, and I don't know if I can say this, I'll try to say it. Bear with me. But if sympathy is, man, golly, it really sucks to be you because you went through all that stuff, I'm glad I'm not you, then it doesn't really connect me and you. If sympathy is, man, those people are really suffering, man, I'm glad I'm not them, but what can I do to help them? It doesn't really build relationship. When years ago, my brother-in-law, he lives here in town, Robbie Jones, I was married to Louise, and his brother died in a tragic car accident. And we went to the funeral, and I can remember what you always do in these situations. I'm thinking, I don't know what to say to him. I don't know, I'm just kind of getting to know him. This is so tragic. But what can I do that's going to fix the situation? I have no idea, and whatever. Hey, Robbie, sorry to hear, whatever. And I just walked away, and I just felt like, I don't know if I made a difference. I don't know if I really connected with him. I'm supposed to be a pastor. I'm supposed to be effective, and I just feel at a loss. Fast forward about 5 years later, my brother dies, and we're at our funeral, and Robbie comes up to me and says, "Man, I know what you're going through." And I just seeing his eyes and seeing his face, I knew that he knew. He had lost his brother. He knew. He had that empathy. He had lost his brother. He had gone through it. And what happened was when I saw his face, in the midst of my grief, in the midst of that pain, I had hope because he had gotten through it. He had walked through that path. He had gone through that journey, and he had come out on the other side, and he had joy in his life, and life still went on, and it made sense, and I got hope through his empathy. It's a powerful thing, the difference between sympathy and empathy. And today, as we look at the gospel, it is about Jesus Christ and his ability to be empathetic with you. It's his ability to say, I have been through everything that you've been through. I know where you've been. Right? So the story is that Jesus is God, and he becomes fully man. And today, at the beginning of his ministry, this is right after the baptism, God says, all right, I'm filling you with the Holy Spirit. You're anointed. All right, you're ready for your ministry. The first thing you're going to do is go to the desert for 40 days and be tempted in every way that man is tempted. That sounds like a fun start to ministry. And that's exactly what God does, because he knew that when Jesus goes out to do the ministry, he has to have an empathetic voice. He has to be able to look at every man and woman and child and say, I know what you're going through. I know the pain. I know the suffering. Jesus is fully empathetic. Now, in the early church, there was all these theories about God. They're trying to figure it out because the Greek mind really didn't like God becoming fully man. It's that seems messy. It seems like, really? Does he have to go to the bathroom? Does God got to go to the bathroom? That's awkward, and all that kind of stuff. And so they had these theories about who Jesus was, and they said, well, really, he's just kind of putting on a man costume, right? He's God, but he just puts on a man costume, and he hung out with us for a little while, and then he became God again. It's okay, but just for a little while. You see, that doesn't speak to us. That doesn't help us. Another theory was he was more like Superman. You know, Clark Kent, he looks like a man, he acts like a man, he eats food, he wears glasses. Maybe they're fake, but he wears them anyway. But really, he's invincible. I mean, there's really nothing that can harm him, save kryptonite. There's nothing that can stop him. And Jesus is more like a Superman, just swooping in to save the day. And the church fathers said, no, none of that can work. You see, God has to become, he has to assume everything that he's going to redeem. God has to become, and he has to assume everything that he's going to heal. So he has to become fully man. Fully, just like me and you. There's no other way to redeem the world than this path forward. Jesus was fully man. And here we are in the desert. In the desert that he experiences, that 40 days with all those temptations, that's the life we live in. That's the picture of the world that we live in on a day-to-day basis. In fact, it's the world that man has lived in ever since the fall. It's the same temptations. Now, do you remember the Ark of the Covenant? Remember, you may have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, which taught a lot of people about the Ark of the Covenant, because you remember when the Nazis saw it, they all melted and whatever, because they opened it, right? But what God put in that Ark of the Covenant, which was to symbolize his very presence and his very power and his very real nature of who he was, in that Ark of the Covenant, they put three things. Okay? Does anybody know those three things? They put in there manna. They put in there Aaron's rod that budded. Okay? And then they put in there the 10 Commandments. And these are the three temptations that Jesus experiences again in the desert. So we read in scriptures, he's been starving for 40 days. Satan comes up to him and he says, you got to be hungry. You see, manna was a representation that God will provide for you. He will always provide for you. You don't need to provide for yourself. And this is what was given to God's people in the desert, in the wilderness, when they had no food, and God said, every day I will rain down food. And the only rule is don't collect it, okay? Because if you try to collect it, it'll be, by the next day, it'll spoil. And people didn't believe, and they collected it. Sure enough, it spoiled. And finally, they started to get the message that I have to live, and I have to trust God for my provision, for my food, for my very existence, for my life, every single day. It's the only way I get through this world. And so manna was in that Ark of the Covenant, and Jesus was tempted to provide for yourself. It's what you're tempted with every day. You have to provide for yourself. God doesn't have your back. He doesn't have your best interest in mind, the enemy would say. Provide for yourself. Work harder, ignore your family, cheat a little bit, cut the corners because you got to look after yourself. And every day we experience that temptation that God's not going to come through, that he's not real, that it won't work, that there will be no manna the next day. And so we try to gather up as much as we can. We try to accumulate, not knowing that it will rust and it will be destroyed by moths and it will pass away. And so Jesus knows that very temptation, that he says, but man lives by the word of God. He lives by the voice of God. My food, my provision is that God is always there. He is always real. He is my Father, and he will speak to me every day, and he will guide me, and he will provide for me. And it's a truth that we have to contend for because it's so difficult in our lives. The next thing was in there was Aaron's rod. You kind of remember the story from the Old Testament, just by way of reminder. It went like this. Moses and Aaron came to the people. They're in the wilderness. They're complaining. I know you've never heard about that. But they were complaining in this congregation called the Israelites. And Moses and Aaron stood up there and they said, who put you guys in charge? Who said you guys were in authority? Why do we have to listen to you? Everything that you're saying leads us down the wrong path. We wanted to go to the promised land, and here we are wandering around the wilderness. Who put you in charge? And so, as in the Old Testament ways, you got to love the Old Testament. They said, okay, well, let's have a contest. You get your staff, and Aaron will get his staff, and we'll put all the staffs in front, and we'll see who's in charge. And Aaron's staff buds into an olive tree, and all the other staffs don't bud, and then the earth opens up, and a lot of people died. It was bad. But he made his point that he is in authority. And the same thing happens to Jesus in that desert. It happens to you and me. And Satan says, you be in authority. I'll hold you up on the mountain. He said, I'll give you all of the world. I'll give you everything the world has to offer. I will give it to you all. If you just deny that God's in authority and you worship me instead, I will give you all of the world. And Jesus, sustained and by the word of God, was able to say, no, I worship God alone. You see, that's the same temptation you go through every day. There's something else out there that will be a better authority. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's the way things are going in a different place. It's the grass is greener pasture. But there's always a sense that God and his authority hasn't gotten me to where I wanted to be. Because I wanted everything to be fine. I wanted there to be no sickness, no pain, no suffering, no whatever. And the world would say to you, I can get you away from all of that. You can always be healthy. And it'll promise you all these things if you simply worship another God. If you worship money, if you worship Satan, if you worship flesh, if you worship pleasure, if you worship whatever the thing is, every day other gods put themselves in front of you and say, let me be your authority and I'll take care of you. Let me be your authority and your life will work out. Let me be your authority and all will be well. And often we say, all right, we'll give it a shot. God hasn't done what I wanted him to do in the way I've wanted him to do it, and I'll take a shot on something else. I'll buy that lottery ticket. I'll chase after that next thing. I'll do the thing I know because maybe that will do it for me. And then finally, again in the Old Testament, it's the Ten Commandments. It's God's law, right? And God's law isn't a set of just arbitrary rules that he's made up to kind of figure out who's good and who's bad, who has the black hats and white hats, sheep and goats, tares and wheats. God's laws and what he shares with us in the Ten Commandments, and Bob did a great job preaching on that a few months ago. But God's law are the way the world works. It is the fabric of the universe. It is an objective reality. It is truth. And if we follow the ways that God has made us, he's our creator. He's our instructor, and he's trying to give us the way to live a perfect life, a way to live in relationship with him and in relationship with one another in which there's peace and joy and love. He's given us this opportunity. But again, we say, well, we'll go a different way. The world says there is no objective truth. The world says we can kind of make up our own rules. The world says the rules that God made, they're so constricting, they're so condemning. Let's just get rid of rules and then everyone will get along. Imagine if there's no heaven. Imagine if there's no God. Imagine if there's no rules. It'll all be great. We'll all just get along and there won't be any problems in the world. All the problems come from God making all these laws because he's mean and he's judgmental and he doesn't want you to have very much fun. Don't dance, don't gamble, don't drink, don't. That's the kind of God, and we reject that because we misunderstand the reality of the world. Every single day, God, in his love, says, you know what, man? If you jump off the cliff, Jesus, and you tempt God, I mean, gravity actually is the way I built this earth, right? And Jesus says, I'm not going to tempt God because I know he's going to protect me, but I'm not going to jump off this cliff, Satan, that I might fall down there to see if God will send his angels to save me. I'm not going to tempt God and put him to the test. And yet every day we find ourselves in that situation and we think, man, there maybe is a better way. Maybe if I don't follow God's laws, I know I'm forgiven, so maybe I can just keep on sinning. I can keep on doing the things that are wrong because it seems to bring me comfort. It sometimes brings me pleasure. It sometimes feels like just even for a moment soothes my pain. And so I will turn my attention. I will turn my addictions. I will turn my life to those things that promise everything. And we come up empty. We fall short. And so Jesus, in this gospel message, says, I got it. I know. I've experienced every temptation that you have. And I've walked through it, right? And I know that y'all have fallen short. So I forgive you. And I invite you again, right? Come with me, okay? You see, Jesus sometimes, we think about him like, hey, Jesus, I love it. I think Ann Nolan in Journey to Restoration said it the other day. She's like, sometimes I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes I go through life and I say, okay, God, I got all these problems. Come down and zap them, fix them all for me, and then I can go on my merry way. And what God is saying is, that's not the kind of, God's a God of power. Don't get me wrong. But he's saying, I want to walk with you through it. My job isn't to be a genie that fixes your problem, but check this out. Because I've been tempted in every way that you've been tempted. I've been mocked, I've been scorned, I've been abused, I've been isolated, I've been lied to, I've been beaten. I know all the temptations of body, mind, and spirit that you have, and I've been through all of them. Let me show you the way through it. I'll walk with you through your life and through your circumstances, and I will take you to the promised land. I will take you to a place of peace and joy and love. Come with me. I know the way, and only does Jesus know the way. When he says, I am the way and the truth and the life, he's not making some theological statement. He's saying, come with me. I know the way through the life that you're in right now. I will show you to the promised land. This is the invitation that Jesus extends to us today because he went through the temptation. I'm reading in the papers. You've probably seen it. It's on social media. It's everywhere. It's in the Wall Street Journal. Guys are texting me about it. I don't do social media, but I know it's out there because everybody's telling me. There's a revival happening at Asbury. I went there. That's where I did my doctoral work. I was in Wilmore, Kentucky. I know the chapel. I've been there. I walked the grounds, right? I know exactly what's going on. But thousands and thousands of people have descended upon this place. And what happened was they went to chapel one day, and they were worshiping God. And then it really just never ended. They just kept going. And they just kept praising God. And they just kept staying in there. But what's different about this revival from other revivals, and God has his reasons for different revivals at different times in our lives, is there's no special person. It wasn't some incredible message. It wasn't the anointed musicians who were just so good. It wasn't anything special other than the fact that God was present and he was real, and he said, I am here with you, and I will walk through life with you. Come be in relationship with me. I'm real, I'm alive, and I'm present. I went on the interweb last night and did the Googling thing, and I just watched some of these guys who went there. Like some experts went, theological, guys, we're going to go figure out what's going on. Let's analyze this thing and see what God's up to. And one guy tells the story. He was like, I just kind of went there, and I was going to sit in the balcony. I was going to just kind of observe and see what's happening. And he says, I felt God's manifold presence. Yeah, that's what a theologian says. I felt that God was real when I was in there. And he said, I intended to stay for like an hour or two and figure it out. And he goes, and by the time I got up, 8 hours had gone by. I wanted to be with God. I wanted to know he was real. And in that moment I did, and that's where I wanted to camp out. Remember last week, first he talked about the transfiguration, right? Jesus was up on the mountain, and there's James and Peter and John, and they're up there, and Jesus, and then Elijah, and then Moses, and they're like, man, let's camp out here because you're alive and you're real. You see, that's the real temptation in our heart. It's the core temptation. Is God real? Is he really present? Does he really know you? Can you really be in a relationship with him? Can he really show you the way? Is he really the way and the truth and the life as he promises us? That Asbury Seminary is not about God coming in power, right? You remember what God did every day in the Garden of Eden? He hung out with Adam and Eve. He wasn't doing miracles. He wasn't doing magic stuff. Hey, check out that tree. He wasn't doing anything like that. He just wanted to be with them. But after the sin, God's presence often had to come in power because there was other gods and there was all these temptations of the world, and God's voice was so drowned out that he would come in power. Pillar of fire by night, pillar of cloud by day. His power was in the Ark of the Covenant, and if you got too close to it, you would glow. And he came in power, and there's time for that. But it's all to get back to what Jesus did. It all was leading up to the fact that Jesus became man. He was incarnate. And he was tempted in every way. So I want you to hear the revival is this. Know God is real. Know that he's present here today. And if you have doubts and you have fears and you have, I'm not sure about that, join the club. You're with everybody else. So we lay those down. And that's why we gather together as a community, as a congregation. Because I don't know why all you guys got up this morning and decided to show up for an hour here, right? And we're going to actually throw out a plate and tell you to put some money in it and all that. Why would you come here? Only if God is real does it make sense. We're not checking off some cultural box. We're not trying to prove to people that we're good people and that we're holy and that we're set apart. We're here because we think God might be real. In a few moments, we're going to break bread. And God again is saying, I'm real. And when you receive communion today, I want you to just simply pray, God, show me today that you're real in a personal way to me. And he'll do it. And that's the gospel of our Lord. Amen.
We pray you've been edified by this presentation. You have been listening to the teaching ministry of the Abbey at Pawleys Island, South Carolina. For more information on the Abbey at Pawleys Island Church or for more audio, please visit our website at theabbeypawleysisland.com.